Welcome to the Get to Know Your IDA podcast, brought to you by the Erie County Industrial Development Agency. I'm Robbie Ann McPherson, your host. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing for the ECIDA, and we do this podcast to debunk myths and to let everybody know all of the good works that IDAs do around the state and especially in Erie County. Today, I'm always thrilled with our guests, but today I'm especially thrilled because we have with us a board member who is also the Deputy Director of LISC, and she's going to tell us what LISC stands for and what they do. Please welcome Tyra Johnson-Hucks. Welcome, Tyra.
Thank you, Robbie. I'm so happy to be here. I was really delighted when you invited me to participate in this podcast.
Oh, I appreciate that. We are so excited when people accept. It's always a good thing.
As should everybody should be excited to be on this podcast.
Right? Bring it on. Bring it on.
Exactly. I will tell you what LISC stands for, which is Local Initiative Support Corporation. We have a LISC Western New York office, and actually there are offices across the country. Mm-hmm. And LISC, although the name recognition probably isn't as high as we would want it to be in these parts, it is one of the oldest, what we call CDFIs in the country, or one of the largest, I should say. It is, which stands for Community Development Financial Institution. And so we span many cities, but also we have a LISC Rural. So we work with people in communities across the country, as I stated. And in Western New York, the LISC office has been here over 20 years.
Wow. So what does our local LISC office do? I know they do a lot. So what are some highlights?
Yes. Well, there are so many things that we do. And so before I say anything else, I'm going to sum it up so people really remember something catchy that they can hold on to.
Great.
I will give you the 3 C's, which is community, capacity, and capital.
Oh, I love that.
So we work with our communities to build capacity, and that capacity may come in the form of helping to strategize and also technical know-how. It comes in the form of helping other nonprofits to kind of build up their reserves, so to speak. So whether that's the people that are working there or their structures or their systems, and then bringing in capital. So as a financial institution, we have several financial products that we like to introduce and have here in Western New York, and we're looking forward to doing more of that. There's many more things I could tell you. I could probably talk for a couple podcasts on what we do, but I will tell you in Western New York, we actually have 4 things specifically that we focus on. And it is, again, I'll try to be somewhat brief with this and concise because I can really go to town with probably any of them.
Sure.
But
we've got all day. Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. Great. But the pillars that we focus on include for livability, which, for a lot of people, you hear the term livability and you're like, what the heck are you talking about, Tyra? So let me just give you a little bit more definition of that. It really has to do with kind of quality of life and making communities great places for people to live and healthy communities as well.
Yeah, and just to interrupt you for 1 second, these are industry definitions, right? Like this isn't just this isn't something that's subjective. These are objective definitions for all the things that you do.
Yes. So in livability is probably the only term that I will say that people will say, well, maybe that's not like a frequently used term. So I try to just give a little bit more character so that people kind of get a sense of what I'm talking about. It has to do with like attracting investment in communities, and in particular under-resourced communities. So that's one thing that I need to underscore. LISC is mission-driven, and we work with under-resourced communities that have had disinvestment, that have had historically perhaps been isolated marginalized. And so we try to focus on those under-resourced communities and helping to build community and capacity and capital.
Wonderful. I love the 3 C's. That's great. I might steal that idea for our.
All right. Well, I stole it from one of my coworkers. So
great.
I will also say, so going back to our priorities and the Western New York office, we also focus on housing. So we recently had a study done with the Partnership for the Public Good and realized there is a huge deficit for affordable housing, upwards of, I think it's 76,000 units that are needed in this region. And so that is really one of our priorities, trying to figure out how we can produce more housing at scale and make those healthy and happy homes. Another one of our main priorities is income and wealth building. Making sure that people have not only good paying jobs, but they can build wealth. So we have a couple different programs that look towards that, and hopefully we'll go more into that a little bit later on. And so I just want to mention our fourth pillar, our fourth priority that we have here is neighborhood business. And so we really are focused on those smaller businesses that make communities great and help with the vitality of a community. And with that said, I will say that in my position as deputy director, I really focus on, I do a number of things, but one of the things that I focus on is inclusive economic development. And by that, I will bring it back to those neighborhood supports. It's really kind of a neighborhood focused level support, because what's good for one neighborhood may be a little bit different than another neighborhood.
Very true. Yes.
Yeah, being inclusive and making sure that those among us that may have the least amount of resources, that we are looking at that and how we can support and uplift those communities as well.
So that is, and I know that's not even all that you do, but for someone listening who may be looking for housing or might want to take advantage of one of your programs, who is a person or organization that would come to you and take advantage of these things?
Well, one of the interesting things about LIST is that we work across channels. We're really what you call an intermediary organization. So we call ourselves oftentimes the connective tissue between organizations and helping to build their capacity. And so we work with government and philanthropic organizations and private and public business to help to build our community and supports for people within our community. So we have programs that we have individually in LIST, but there's also, we work with a lot of partners. And that is our platform, kind of going across channels, working with our partners, making sure that we are being collaborative and that we're looking for collective impact. So we are kind of helping our partners to align to figure out, what strategies they'd like to implement. And so I give you that longer answer because if somebody were looking, for example, something to do with housing, we may be, one of several organizations or many organizations that are working in housing. One of our focuses, as I mentioned before, is doing production of housing. However, if there was other needs in terms of, let's say you need housing immediately, or let's say you need help with figuring out where to live, how it relates to where you're working, benefits, and housing. There's other organizations that we partner with that may be a better fit. So all that to say is that we work in an intersection. We're a connective tissue. There are lots of partners that we work with, and hopefully what we could do is give you somewhat of a roadmap of perhaps where will you best be suited. However, there are programs that, of course, we welcome people to learn more about that we are specifically working on.
That's so important. You mentioned all that collaborative, and connectivity. As a region, and I don't know, I guess we could have a whole separate discussion on why this is the case, but a lot of our agencies, whether they're nonprofits or economic development agencies like we are, a lot of them tend to work in silos, and we're all sort of, trying our best and doing the best we can to solve problems, maybe not realizing that if we joined up with a couple other silos and linked them together, that we would be solving more problems in a better way. So
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think actually from what I've been told about the history of LISC in Western New York, that is actually the reason why LISC was brought in. There was a missed opportunity when it came to some funding, a funding opportunity, and it was because the entities were working in these silos and they couldn't get it together. So being an intermediary organization, that's really one of our chief objectives, is to make sure that we are looking at the other organizations, community, whether it be community organizations and community development corporations, or whether it is our philanthropic community, and saying, how can we make sure that we pull all of those pieces together, get the big picture, and make sure that those resources are kind of going to where it needs to go, and what is the best organization to do that. So we don't necessarily always put ourselves at the forefront. Sometimes we're building capacity, as I said before, for those organizations that might be the best fit for that type of work.
Which is a really critical function. And which brings us to also why you are such a valuable member of the ECIDA board, because you are looking at economic development projects and the things that the board reviews and votes on. But I'm going to take a wild guess that you're also thinking, oh, you know what? I can bring this person with that person, and I can help. So let's talk about your role on the ECIDA board. And you're also very active as a committee member, which is really wonderful. So
I try to be. We have lots of committees, and I think there's
yes,
two.
We do.
Well, I think I'm on 2 or 3. I should know how many I'm on. I think we actually just got to the point where we are kind of re-upping for this year. So we'll see.
Yes, we have, as I've mentioned on the podcast many times, we have about 155 scheduled meetings every year, with the board meetings, the policy committee meetings, the governance committee, our finance committee. So there are lots and lots, and those are just the scheduled ones. Those aren't the ones that come up with our projects. So, so my kudos to you for
well, let me just clarify for all your listeners, I don't have to go to 155 meetings per year. Yeah. Because if I did that, then I wouldn't be able to do all the other important work that I'm trying to do as my role with LISC. But I do quite enjoy participating as not only a board member, but a committee member as well. So, for example, one of the committees I sit on is a governance committee. And first joining that within ECIDA is quite eye-opening. I get to look at things like the mission, the metrics and our goals as to how to move the organization forward. We evaluate those. We try to make sure that they're delineated in such a way that is not only clear and concise, but has some, should I say, meat on the bones, that they are
yes.
not just, inspirational, that there's really an intention to make sure that these goals are met, and that they are goals that are, I think, very much so. When I think about those meetings, the goals are, there's a lot of deliberate and there's historic information put into them. So the staff at ECIDA, they always come very well prepared for the meetings. And if you ask them a question about, well, why did you pick that metric? They'll say, oh, it wasn't, it was never picked per se. It's based off of historical averages, or it's based off of some research that has been done. And it could be numerous things, but it's never just something fly by night. We thought this looked good. there's always a long explanation as to how it got there and why it's there and why it's important, and suggestions as to what we should do with it. But I also appreciate the fact that the staff at the ECIDA is always very welcome to our observations and what we would like to, see as improvements, perhaps. I know at a recent governance committee meeting, I questioned a particular facet of one of our goals, and at the next meeting, John was there with all sorts of information, showing us slides on the things that he had come up with and a rationale for why we should move forward. And I was highly impressed. And, it's very nice to see the efficiencies that's in the office, but also the dedication to making sure you get it. You get it right. And by you, I mean the staff at the ECIDA.
Sure. I appreciate your sharing that so much, because I do think that and I can't blame them, where the public is concerned and how they might view our agency, I use the analogy that it's sort of like the Wonka factory, the old candy factory, where you don't really know what's going on behind those walls. And really, everything we do is really transparent. And that's a good thing. Our documents and project applications, et cetera, it's public. And all of those metrics, you're right, I can tell you from the other side where we're putting them together, there is deliberate discussion and review and evaluation. We're not really a check the box kind of a group. And I think that a big reason for that is our board and the board members like you who offer their opinions, who are involved and engaged and looking for, not looking for problems, but, looking for ways that we can make things more efficient or more meaningful, et cetera, because there are so many stakeholders, and we answer to the residents and the businesses of Erie County, which are very diverse. So I know from the staff standpoint, it's so important to get that information and that leadership from the board as far as strategic directions and evaluating our metrics. So right back at you.
I will say it's interesting because I often approach the meetings coming from a learner mentality. So yes, I am there to advise, but I'm also there to figure out, why you're doing things the way you have and why has it been successful. And so that I very much appreciate, kind of hearing the behind the scenes information as to how certain things came about. And I'm absorbing, oftentimes I may be, that's in some of the committees, I'm not that quiet, or some of the meetings are not that quiet. And in general, I may not be the most a verbal person on the board, but I am really looking forward to kind of absorbing what is coming down the pipeline and how things are done and how it affects our community overall.
Mm-hmm. That is so appreciated. And speaking of committees and being involved, I would love to talk about your role in the disaster emergency PPE grant program. Just for a little background for everyone listening, when the COVID shutdown started to affect businesses, there were some laws that were changed under the emergency declaration, and we were able, as an agency, to set up a grant program to reimburse small businesses and nonprofits for PPE expenses. And it was up to $10,000, and the business would apply and provide us with receipts and all that documentation, and then they would get reimbursed. We had so much positive feedback from many, many businesses, and it was over $700,000 that we allocated, and the only reason that we sunsetted the program is because the emergency declaration was lifted, which no longer enabled us to do that. But you were on the committee that reviewed all of these applications, so I would love to hear about your experience and some of the things that you saw and read and how you felt about it.
Well, I actually was again very happy to work with that committee. In working with lists and inclusive economic development, as I said, I work a lot with making sure we look at neighborhood level needs, that we're looking at small business in particular. And nonprofits, we work with a lot of nonprofits, and so I had a vested interest in trying to make sure that those dollars were distributed as best we could to as many organizations and businesses as we could, but also to make sure that we are inclusive of different types of businesses, whether it be minority owned, women owned, and veteran owned businesses.
Yes.
And so that's that's a focus that I have every day. And I know that the ECIDA has that focus as well, but I like to be very vocal on issues of minority and women business involvement in particular. And so that gave me an opportunity to offer some of my experience, especially as being a owner. In a past life, I was an owner of a retail business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could definitely put myself in the shoes of many of the organizations that we were trying to help. I immediately, when the pandemic started, I thought about kind of all of the issues that would come to mind in terms of being a small business owner and all the things you have to pay for while you're not able to really create as much revenue, if any, as much revenue as you're used to having. And so those COVID relief grants were, I feel, very critical, key to small business that was still trying to keep their doors open. And so those grants, if I recall, they were specifically to help them get their PPE, their personal protection equipment, so that they can continue operations. And my thoughts about that is, we have many, many businesses in this area that could benefit from that. But oftentimes in working with minority and women business, the things I hear is that we may not have access to those opportunities, or maybe in their circles of influence, it's not something that comes up. So they may miss the opportunity. And so going back to that word intention, which is a word I happen to use a lot, I wanted to make sure we were very intentional and how we delivered that message and who we delivered that message to. So being in that particular group, we talked a lot about the marketing of the grant opportunity, putting it in publications that may be frequented more often by people of color. Making sure that we were getting it out to perhaps key people and organizations that could help distribute that messaging, and tap people on the shoulder and say, you know what, you should really apply for that. And as a matter of fact, I did that like with people I knew. I sent out individual emails telling business owners that I knew, like, you really need to jump on this opportunity. I was making phone calls and letting people know that these dollars were available, and that there was a window that they needed to get into. And I still think that it is, it was great to see those dollars going out the door. But for me personally, it was great to see that over 50% of those dollars went to minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses.
Yes, that was a requirement too. The businesses were limited. They had to be in a highly distressed area, or minority, women, or service disabled, veteran owned. And there were criteria about the size of the business. It was 50 or fewer employees. So this grant program was specifically targeted toward exactly who you were describing, people that have these smaller businesses. They're not in huge circles where they have, maybe a chain restaurant or something where they have a net to fall back on. These are the individual people with small stores and little retail things. And we actually also had a lot of, the tourism industry was hit so hard by, obviously, with the things closing. So we did have museums and other types of nonprofits that are attractions. And it was
Exactly.
it was for fixtures too. So, plexiglass and, masks, hand sanitizer, gloves,
Hmm.
even I
In
think,
some cases, equipment so that
yes,
the
yes,
air could be filtered and things of that sort. Yep.
absolutely. Yeah. And it went right to them. So that you're right. That was wonderful. And you're right about the marketing strategy. It was wonderful what you brought to the table because it was we did do some advertising in Business First, and we also did advertising with Spectrum because they're able to really target through through digital downloads and households and all that demo information. They can target the minority business household. They can target the veteran household. So there was some of that. But as you said, I really think that the majority of people were brought to the program by efforts like you were describing, calling them, walking into the store. When you're standing in a highly distressed area, which is a census designation for those of you who might not know, and they cover certain zip codes and blocks and areas. So if you're standing in one and you walk into a business, I know I did the same thing. I would say, "Hey, by the way, do you know about this grant program?" And I think that grassroots effort and the personal invitations, I think that really drove a lot of the applications. And
I
that
would
was you
also
behind that.
just, well, I would be remiss if I didn't say that there was a great group of people that were working on that grant with us. So in
Mm-hmm.
addition to the staff, there was other key members in our community that came to the table and was participating and offering their suggestions about how to distribute that information. And so it was really a collaborative effort. And I enjoyed tremendously working with that group. And collaboratively, we determined several means in which to get the word out. And I'd like to think that there's some long withstanding effects on kind of those conversations. So it opened up some discussions and some questions about how we interact and how I think ECIDA can go forward in some of the things that you're doing. And I think also, some of those companies that came to the table that received the grant had probably not even heard of ECIDA before
Mm-hmm.
that grant opportunity. So I'm hoping there's some sort of chain effect where, there's other opportunities, whether it is, well, most of them are retail. And I know that ECIDA, typically you don't give like tax inducements to kind of retail organizations. However, there's small business loans, there's things of that sort that
Correct, right.
the IDA does work with. So it could have opened the doors to them learning about other opportunities that would benefit them.
Absolutely. And you're right. Because of state law, we cannot incentivize retail businesses. However, with our business loans and if it's a adaptive reuse development, we might be able to incentivize the carved out portion of the development that's not retail, et cetera. So you're right. There were a lot of small businesses who just may not cross paths with the ECIDA because it isn't quite our client profile, but I know that we got some wonderful letters from a lot of businesses who said if we weren't able to have that, even though it wasn't a huge amount of money, if we weren't able to just get past that little unexpected expense, we might not have made it. And so many businesses didn't make it. So
and it's amazing how the money, like $10,000 was the maximum for that, but that is for small business, that could be a make or break point. And
exactly.
what you were saying actually just reminded me that refrain is something I've heard actually quite often. And one of the things that I'm doing with LIST is we have a small business grant that is about to open up. We had the same grant last year. It's actually generously funded by General Motors, and we call it Scale Up Western New York. And so last year we were able to award 12 businesses anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000.
Wow.
And those grants were specifically designated towards Black-owned business. During the pandemic, it was hard for everybody, but Black-owned business in particular, at some point early in the pandemic, about 40% of Black-owned businesses was shutting their doors. And so
wow.
There was a lot of need.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and working with General Motors, we asked if we can make this designation towards Black-owned businesses in Western New York. And we did look at particular zip codes as a priority. And also we looked at, how long they've been in business. So these were not startups, these were businesses that were established, and we really wanted to help them to not only get through the pandemic, but to scale up. And that's what we called it, scale up, because we targeted businesses that were, we thought, in a space where they would be able to get some opportunity with some of the things coming down the pipeline with federal dollars and such. And so I have to put that in here, Robbie, because we have another launch coming out March 24th. So we're going to do it again this year.
Oh, great. Okay.
And so it's timely for me to say, ding, 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 we're going to do another round of grants. And hopefully people listening to the podcast can go to the List Western New York website and see how people can apply for those grants.
Sure. And before we go, because I wasn't exactly truthful. We don't have all day. We do have some
we
limits.
Don't. I was getting ready to tell you about 14 other things, Robbie.
Yeah, anything that you want to share. But first, just so we don't forget, tell everybody how to find these programs, how to get a hold of you. What's your website?
Yeah, so List Western New York or list.org is our general website, and there's a /WNY. But if you go to list.org, you will be able to find connection to our Western New York site, but you can always use that /. On that website is my contact information, as well as all my colleagues in the Western New York field office. And we have other information on there. For example, one of my colleagues is doing some amazing work with corridor management. So training and working with our corridors and the people that are business support organizations to help them learn about how they can, not only better support business, but how they can revitalize their communities. Mm-hmm. So there's some great information about that. There's also links to something we've done in our livability or quality of life space. There's a great hub site tool that we have on there. So that focuses on the east side in particular, and several neighborhoods on the east side. And it is, we call it a hub site because it is layering information, geographic information, that one can use, whether you're an individual or a community organization, and look at how there's synergies and relations to various aspects of quality of life. So they're on there, for example, and I know we don't have all day, so
Go ahead.
On this hub site that has been created with community input, because we're all about collective impact and getting the voices of our community heard. So there was a long endeavor to make sure that we captured the information that people said they needed and wanted. But things like, it may have, for example, a layer for high-use bus stops. It may have a layer for how walkable a neighborhood is. It has a layer for businesses and looking at those business corridors. It has both economic and quality of life data and layers of that. There's also things like the zoning for the area, property information on there. There is so much. I can go on and on and on, but it is a free tool that is available to anybody, and you can find it on our website. But it does focus on targeted East Side communities, and
That's
we're hoping
amazing.
that people can go and look at it and use it. Like maybe if they're looking for some information to give more detail and background to the needs of their community.
Mm-hmm.
They can go there and kind of see, okay, we have all these vacant properties in this area, and we have, you know, bus stops over here, and we have these sort of community resources, whether it's for our elderly community or for maybe for young people. So seeing what the assets are. So in a positive light, you can see the assets, but you may also see what is needed to help make that neighborhood a great place. And so that's available. And again, it's a free tool, and you can check out our website to get the link for that.
That's wonderful, because and I can think of a million different people and organizations where that information is valuable. For example, if I am, if I want to open a pet store, I can look up and see, oh, you know what, there are 3 pet stores on this block, so maybe I'll go somewhere else. Or if you're looking for bus traffic, you want to open a coffee shop and you want to be near a bus stop. And I mean, that's that right there is truly economic development, creation, right? Because it's inspiring. Someone might get an idea from looking at the data, or if you already have an idea and you have a business plan, et cetera, you can target it and make the most of your resources. Because I feel like that's really what it's all about. Is we all have these limited resources, and if we can just make the best out of it and target each one, and squeeze every penny we can and every hour we can, and all that, we can really see some incredible growth.
I just want to give one more example, because this actually came up last night. And so one of the programs that I'm working on is the community-based real estate development training program. And so I've been a co-facilitator of that this is the 3rd cohort. And that is a developer training program specifically for people that have properties on the east side of Buffalo. And so we were talking about, the 8 steps of going through real estate development, and kind of looking at those pre-development tools. And so our speaker last night was giving an assignment and saying, okay, the first thing you need to do is kind of figure out what your property has in terms of assets. If you were describing it, what would you say? Is there a bus line? Is there a coffee shop? Is there, how would you tell somebody about where your property is and why it would be potentially a good investment, or potentially something that they would, want to get involved with? And so one of the things I immediately did was said, the city actually has a website where you could see all the most recent developments that's going on. So you should go to this website and see everything that's happening around in that particular neighborhood. But you can also go to this hub site that I'm talking about that's on the list website and see all these other things. And you could see like the walk score for that community, and you could see where the bus stop is, and you could see like other businesses. And so in the real estate community, it's a valuable tool as well, because it's giving you a picture. Of course, you should go out there and walk around ECIDA is all about helping real estate development as well. You could do that, with your very eyes and go there. But now we have access to a lot of information that, 5-10 years ago, it would have took you hours and days and weeks to get this information. You might have to go to somebody's office to get it, or you might have to make a phone call, or, there was lots of different channels you had to go through to get to that information. And now we have access to it at our fingertips, and you can see it layered together. So
that's amazing. And so who put that together? Does a vendor do that, or?
So that particular site, and like I said, it's targeted neighbors for the East Side, came out of a program that we are helping to lead, and we call it Within. And we could do a whole nother podcast, Robbie, if you're ever interested in inviting me back. Me and one of my coworkers, we could do a whole nother podcast on that. It was originally, it's called a comprehensive livability investment plan. And so, but now it has this brand called Within, and it's called Within for a number of reasons. It's like working within. You can imagine all the different things, but it is collective impact, community-led, community-driven type of planning process. And so out of that process, there was a need for organizations and individuals and businesses to know more about their community. So, the question was asked, what type of information do you need to make these decisions about how to make your community better? And so, we need to know this. We need to know that. We need to know the infrastructure, the transportation, what developments are happening, where people are living, where the vacant properties are, what can be done differently. So that tool was created within that process for that community, and we're hoping to actually do it in other communities. But we would have to figure out how to get the support for that, and hopefully we'll do more of it. But like I said, I'd be happy to come back and talk more about that.
I would love for you to come back. I know there's the connections, and as you so eloquently said in the beginning, it's all about connectivity, right? So
yes.
So a product like that, a developer who wants to build $100 million whatever, they can use that. A person like I described before who might want to open a little pet store or a bodega or something like that, they can use that. I mean, that is an incredible example of problem solving.
Exactly why I was telling those developers, those emerging developers, okay, you can play with the big boys because they may have people, big boys and girls, they may have people that can do that for them.
Sure.
But now you can, you have access to these resources as well. So it is, it's a really great time to coming out of the pandemic. Hopefully it's going to be a much better time to be a business owner and also a developer. Yes. And, there's just lots of parallel lines that both ECIDA and LISC work in. And so again, working with the ECIDA board and the committees, it has been eye-opening, but it's also been a way for me to contribute some of the things that I'm hearing from the community and relay that back to the staff and also the board members, and in hopes that we are all doing what we can to kind of uplift not only our economic development, but just the vitality of our communities in general.
Yes, and I can definitely tell you again from the staff point of view at the ECIDA, the leadership that you and the board provide in that very way. It is a two-way thing, right? We have our marching orders by state statute, and we have a board of directors that advises on things like exactly what you said. So when you're sitting around the table with the other board members, that ability to say, hey, you know what? I think you and I should work on this, and and just create these collaborations. That's how we grow our economy. That's how we solve the problems that we have in economic development. So I don't want to speak for everyone on the staff, but I'm pretty sure they would all agree with me that we really love having you as a board member and appreciate all of your attention and efforts. It's really, our whole board is really remarkable. I think we're very lucky.
It is a great place to be.
Yeah.
And I just want to say in closing, I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and all of your listeners. And, they should be listening. I'm going to do your plug. They should be listening to all the podcasts because there's a lot of great information that you are providing and a lot of interesting people that you are interviewing. So I hope that only more and more people have the chance to listen, and that base grows rapidly.
Oh, I appreciate that. And thank you once again, Ms. Tyra Johnson-Hucks, who's the Deputy Director of LISC, the Local Initiatives Support Corporation. I got that right?
Got it.
And so just one last time, let everybody know your website and...
Yeah, they can go to lisc.org, and that will show the LISC national website, because LISC is a national organization, but our local office, if they use that /WNY, they can get to our local office website as well. And then my contact information is on there.
Wonderful. And so thank you so much to our guest, ECIDA board member and Deputy Director of LISC, Tyra Johnson-Hucks. And for those of you who want to find out more about ECIDA programs or other episodes of this podcast, we're pretty much available wherever podcasts are sold, as they say. But you can go to our website, which is ecidany.org. So thank you so much, Tyra, for your time today. And we will definitely have you back. So I will hold you to that. And thanks to all our listeners. We will see you next time. This has been the Get to Know Your IDA podcast, brought to you by the ECIDA.